there is such hope and light at the end of the tunnel, because I can honestly sit here and say that I cannot believe that I am this lucky to have be one of the ones who did get sober and overcame that battle of alcoholism. So I'm super proud that I've been sober since 2014. And then literally shortly a few months later, have this crazy dream to make lip gloss, which is, the dream wasn't like this is the business, but in the dream, there were all of these native little girls and, with their brown little faces, and they were covered in lip gloss and made such a mess of themselves. And what I remember most about that dream was just the joy and happiness they had felt. So looking back now, I realize as a brand, we're really just trying to create those incredible feelings of joy and happiness for Indigenous youth all over the world.
Welcome to the Wise Consumer Podcast, the answer to your eco-friendly and healthy lifestyle questions. How to reduce your exposure to harmful chemicals, whether or not it's normal to have a painful period, how to live an eco-friendly lifestyle on a budget, and more. With the help of experts, I'm talking scientists, toxicologists, endocrinologists, cosmetic chemists, you'll get knowledge and know-how to your most pressing health concerns and sustainability questions straight from the source. I'm Madeline Weisskopf, your host, confidant, and in-house science nerd, here on a mission to help empower, inspire, and support you in your own health and eco journey. Because, friend, I am a firm believer that if you don't feel good, you can't do good. So, pour yourself a cup of tea, kick off your shoes, take a deep breath, and let's get started. Jenn Harper woke up in the middle of the night in 2015 after having, as she shares, a crazy dream. A dream where Native little girls were playing with lip gloss, making a mess, but above all else, filled with joy. So she jumped out of bed, reached for a pen and paper, and proceeded to write down everything she had witnessed throughout her dream. Interestingly enough, having little to no business experience at the time, she had no idea that what she was actually doing was writing down the foundation of her first ever business plan for what would come to be known as Cheekbone Beauty, a socially conscious cosmetic brand that empowers and brings hope to Indigenous youth. Little did she know that this vision, this dream, this calling, however you want to define it, would be the beginnings of a healing journey that would change not only Jenn's life, but countless others as well. As an Anishinaabe-Canadian, Jenn's journey has not been an easy one. Throughout most of her adult life, Jenn unfortunately battled with alcoholism, an addiction that sadly afflicted numerous other members in her family as well, most notably her grandmother, who, unbeknownst to Jenn at the time, was a residential school system survivor. According to the Canadian Encyclopedia, quote, "The residential school program isolated Indigenous children from their families and communities. Under the guise of educating and preparing Indigenous children for their participation in Canadian society, the federal government and other administrators of the residential school system committed what has since been described as an act of cultural genocide. As generations of students left these institutions, they returned to their home communities without knowledge, skills, or tools to cope in either world. The impacts of their institutionalization in residential school continued to be felt by subsequent generations. This is called intergenerational trauma," end quote. After learning about her grandmother's experience in the residential school system, Jenn started gaining a better understanding of how intergenerational trauma had personally impacted her family. In fact, researchers today are finding that intergenerational trauma is often directly linked to a greater risk for mental distress, depression, addictive behaviors, and substance misuse, just to name a few. Ultimately, this historical family knowledge helped Jenn to overcome her own struggle with alcoholism, inspiring her to create and redefine a new story for herself and the next generation, one of hope, healing, and empowerment. Because, as Jenn shares with us today, quote, "When there's generational trauma, there's also generational healing and generational wisdom," end quote. And that is a new story and mission that she, Jenn Harper, as the founder of Cheekbone Beauty, strives to share with others in her community and around the world. I am honored to have Jenn on the podcast today to share her personal and entrepreneurial journey with all of us. She truly is a beacon of light for so many and leading a movement that I believe you, my wonderful listener, and I can fully get behind and support. We covered a lot of ground in this conversation, from Jenn's challenges with addiction, her grandmother's experience in the residential school system, and the impact this trauma has had on her family over the years, to launching a business with only $500 in her bank account and creating a brand that honors our earth, its people, and helps to empower the next generation of Indigenous youth. I am a fan of all things Cheekbone Beauty, its mission, and the story of this remarkable founder. So without further ado, I'm gonna let Jenn take it from here. Well, Miss Jenn, are you ready?
So ready. Let's do this.
Let's do it. Well, Jenn, it is such an honor, really a privilege to be able to chat with you and to share your story with my audience. So thank you so very much for making the time to chat with all of us today.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for inviting me. I'm so excited to speak with you.
I'm really excited as well, and I really want to honor your story. And as I was preparing for this conversation, one of the themes that kept popping up throughout your interviews and your blogs was how Cheekbone Beauty has been part of your healing journey. And I would, for anyone who isn't as familiar with your story as I am, because I've been preparing for this conversation, I was wondering if you could explain a little bit and explore that with us. How has Cheekbone Beauty, how has it played a role in your healing journey?
Oh, it's been, I think it's critical, the critical piece. So we're gonna get super raw and real and jump right into it.
We are.
But I battled alcoholism for
Mm,
so many years, and grew up believing the stereotypes about Native Americans and Native Indigenous people, and which are, some of them are that, they're all alcoholics. They all are lazy, they all have no jobs. And so unfortunately, when you're surrounded with those ideas or those perceptions that other people have about you, and in some cases, those things are true, and not that they're not the lazy part, but why was addiction such a commonality among my people? And so it took me long into my adult years to figure that all out. But in 2014, I finally got sober after really probably battling most of my 30s with alcoholism. So I
oh
was
man.
38 years old, and I was about to like literally lose everything. My husband was going to leave and take our children, and I feel like today there's so many situations where I know I'm so lucky to be alive and have such a loving family surround me at that time. And it took a long time because I did what a lot of alcoholics or addicts do, rehab in 2010, relapse, try again, another rehab. It's just it is the most excruciating experience of my life. But there is such hope and light at the end of the tunnel, because I can honestly sit here and say that I cannot believe that I am this lucky to have be one of the ones who did get sober and overcame that battle of alcoholism. So I'm super proud that I've been sober since 2014, and then literally shortly a few months later have this crazy dream to make lip gloss, which is, the dream wasn't like this is the business, but in the dream, there were all of these native little girls and, with their brown little faces, and they were covered in lip gloss and made such a mess of themselves. And what I remember most about that dream was just the joy and happiness they had felt. So looking back now, I realize as a brand, we're really just trying to create those incredible feelings of joy and happiness for Indigenous youth all over the world. So from that night, literally woke up and I was like, sat up in bed and I like, to me, it was so clear. I'm like, oh, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to figure out how to make lip gloss. And then I really wanted to start this foundation in my grandmother's name, who was a residential or boarding school survivor. So just to explain what that means a little bit, when Europeans discovered this beautiful land that North America is, there were a lot of people living here peacefully prior to that, and which are our Native Americans, Native Canadians. And what happened was when they discovered how beautiful this land and these countries were, what they wanted was to assimilate Native Americans into the more European or colonized culture. So they created these school systems that was designed to do that. However, this was not a pleasant experience for children. We all know, like science explains to us, the critical time of being 0 to 6 years old, how impactful those years are
Mm,
in a children's life. And then, all of your childhood years, how important it is to be surrounded by love, the love of a family, and foster that. And so when my grandmother was taken away from our family's
mm,
reservation, she was put in one of those schools, my grandfather as well. And
mm-mm.
she stayed there till she was 16.
Oh
So for like
my.
well over 10 years of her life, like no love was being taught to her. And it's really painful when you know the stories. And I will preface that this is my family's experience. This is the only story that I know personally.
Hmm.
And my grandmother's no longer here to even continue. And for many years, she never even talked about what happened. So all of the
Hmm.
information that I know about this is from my aunties, her daughters, and my father. So they when they left and came out of those school systems, they just really do what I think a lot of trauma victims do. You sort of push it to the back of your mind and you really don't want to think about it again. However, we know that to go on and live a happy, joyful life, we need to heal from those things that cause us trauma in our lives. And so, unfortunately, when my grandmother went back, she went on, she had 8 children, never received therapy or even her version of therapy. It was that pushing of those feelings, not talking about what happened. And so, what happened, we now know in many experiences, what happened in Canada actually is there was actually an inquiry. So, for 6 years, the Canadian government and people that ran these schools and victims of residential school systems, the government paid for studies to be done. And what came out of that study is this recognition, or now what we know is called trauma or generational trauma. So when someone is put in a situation or event that they're not equipped to deal with, that is then passed on to the next generation and the next until the healing begins. And so my grandmother, became an angry alcoholic,
Mm,
and that,
mm, mm,
raising 8 children in that state, then my father became an angry alcoholic. And sure enough, I became an angry alcoholic, as well as my siblings. Like every sibling I have
mm,
also has their own battle with addiction. And then I also lost my brother to suicide in 2016, because how trauma manifests itself, it's either with substance and suicide. Those are two commonalities. But there is, I always say that that is the narrative that the public sees about Native people. And what we're doing now, and what I want to do as a brand, is really tell a new story. Because when
yes.
there's generational trauma, there's also generational healing,
Mm,
and there's also generational wisdom, right?
mm,
That comes. And so that is the new story we're telling. And I feel so proud and honored to have a brand that is been part of, like you said, it is literally, you know, got sober in that 2014, a few months later had this dream, and so began this pathway of me creating a new passion and obsession in my life, and removing that pathway I created for addiction and alcohol in my brain. I've done so much studying and research on the brain, and fully understand now that we
mm.
as human beings have the capability to create new pathways. And so Cheekbone Beauty is certainly mine.
Oh my goodness. There is so much to I have so many, there's so much to break down in this. And I want to put a pin in your mindset, because that was something as I was preparing for this, I was like, she has this mindset that I want to explore a little bit, because I guarantee all of us could learn from you, Jenn, in terms of how you've overcome all of this to create not only a flourishing, impactful, eco friendly, you know, just amazing brand, but also like how you've overcome it in your personal life. But I want to take it back and just when we talk about your grandmother's story, thank you for sharing that, and also thank you for being vulnerable and sharing about your own personal addiction. It's so challenging, and just for anyone listening, obviously I am no expert around this, but as I was preparing for this, I read that 150,000 children went through the residential school system in Canada. And the last school, which shocked me, unfortunately, was in 1996. And it wasn't until 2008, if I understand correctly, that they did what you said is like the Truth and Reconciliation. Is that correct?
Correct, correct. All of the what you just said is correct. And so in the United States, they called it a boarding school system,
Mm.
but it was the same idea, very, very much.
So for you to be doing this, it's like there's still people who are who have this in their story, this trauma, and to be able to bring light to this next generation is just something. I mean, this is why I started my podcast, because I just want to acknowledge you for this. And you shared a quote here that you said, "What would have happened if I saw people who looked like me creating amazing things in this world? What would that have meant?" What does that mean to you? And especially, what do you think that means for this next generation of, you know, is it Indigenous or Native Americans in your community?
Yeah, I think it's really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
We've all heard that statement, when you see it, you can be it. And so unfortunately, we all know the branding, specifically in the beauty space, has been very Eurocentric for many, many years.
Yeah.
Even just being, I think, a brunette, sometimes you don't feel like you can relate to the branding that we saw for so, so long. We're seeing amazing changes happening now, which is incredible. And so what that really means is, when people from our communities rise up and do something that is of impact, it actually saves lives. And I firmly believe that. Some of the things that brought my brother, not understanding fully, he hid his pain with mental health behind humor.
Mm.
It was so shocking to me to learn that when he did take his own life, I was like many siblings would be, but like so shocked and blindsided. Like it would be the last person that I would think that would happen to be completely honest. Um, but what so many things that I remember from our conversations prior was, or message, like he would send me DMs. If there was a native that was successful, like I was getting a DM about it, whether it's like a sports person, so like NHL hockey, or somebody in entertainment of like or anybody like doing anything incredible. And so when I was creating the brand, I realized how powerful that would be to create role models for Indigenous youth. Our mission and vision at Cheekbone Beauty is helping every Indigenous kid on the planet see and feel their value in the world while we craft sustainable color cosmetics. And so that's our North Star. We'll never stop doing that. And the beauty is, so as much as we're here in North America, what is interesting on a global setting, there's Indigenous people and every continent around the world. And really, the truth is that every one of those communities have been impacted by colonization just as much as we have been here
Yeah.
in North America. And it's never in a positive way. It's
Yeah.
always really sadly in a negative way. And what we know too is, I find super interesting and really powerful information for our youth, is that the we make up 5% of the world's population as Indigenous people, but we're protecting 80% of the world's biodiversity.
Mm.
So when you see in the media those people like with protests at pipelines, or protests because of salmon farming and water systems being disrupted because of some kind of industrialization thing happening, or what we see happening in the Amazon rainforest. Those are the people that are like literally on the front lines protecting what they're so innately connected to.
Yeah.
And it really helps when I think about just things that my family or father say. We're Ojibwe or Anishinaabe-Moan. We come from the Bear Clan. And it's so funny to me, like I'll get a message from my dad on Facebook, like a bear is in the backyard, and it's like our cousins are here, right? Like, but
Mm.
that's how really native people think. Like they feel like this connection to anything in nature that is living and breathing, and that's why they're the ones protecting and being so active in protecting things that cause environmental damage.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect transition to Oh, well, I want to acknowledge you for that because I think it's absolutely correct. And I think this is one of the reasons I love what you're doing so much. But I'm curious, you had also said, you look to nature as you create your products. And I would love to hear kind of, as the founder of Cheekbone Beauty, what's your thought process as you're doing this? And you have sustainable products, you have, plant hand sourced ingredients. What is your thought process as you're creating these to honor our earth?
Yeah. So if, when I started this process, we started the brand with very, like, I had literally, no joke, it was $500. I had a full-time job in my career has been in the food industry. So no experience. Remember, like, having that dream, I should have told everyone that I had no experience in the beauty space. I just love beauty products and always have, but zero experience there. So if I was to go back, I've said this before, I might have chose making, like, I don't know, scissors as a business versus the makeup industry, because it's so highly competitive and kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But now that I'm here, um, I would sit and think, okay, we're shipping these orders. We were using, like any other indie brand, those shiny mailers from the beginning, and then discovered you can't even recycle those. And just the packaging, the manufacturer that we partnered with out of Toronto, they would not change. You had to, like, use all of their plastic black packaging. Like, there
Mm,
was no other option. And I was like, okay. So I knew going in, I'm like, this is not how I really want it, but I'm going to just test the market. Like, is there a need for this brand to
yeah.
exist? One, for us, our first layer, I always say, of being a sustainable business was we're literally just started to sustain our communities. Like, our kids needed support. And so, and what I mean by that, just so people understand, statistically speaking, Native American children, youth, take their own lives
Mm,
at much, much higher rates than any other race in North America. So that those, when I started reading those statistics, and that same year that I launched Cheekbone Beauty, like, so tragically, like, there was these suicide pacts happening among 10, 11, 12-year olds
oh
on
my gosh.
reservations. And if you've never been to a reservation, it always is such a beautiful setting in terms of what, nature is, but there is the hidden behind the scenes of violence and addiction and so many other things that are really painful for children. So I don't want to, I don't know what goes on in every place, but I know that from personally where my family's from, there's those hidden behind the scene things that are quite evident. And we know if a child is growing up in that kind of situation, of course, those thoughts of taking your own life are very, very real. And so that first layer of building this brand was about, how do we sustain our kids, like,
Yeah.
make them see that there's a way out, there's
Yeah.
something better, there's hope. That's really what the first vision for Cheekbone Beauty was. Then when I spent about 18 months and we were growing, I was like, look, I've got to figure out, one, where I'm going to get some money, because you're making money just bootstrapping, like any traditional entrepreneurial story,
Yep.
like, just enough to, like, get things done, but not enough to get big things done that I
Yeah.
really wanted to work on. And so then began the search, one, for some financial support to fund, and then secondly, me entering a space on how am I going to get anyone to create packaging, or does new packaging exist, and formulations, like raw ingredients. So many of us, we don't even think about, I think, if you wash your face at the end of the day, or shampoo or body cleanse, whatever we're using, all of those things go down the drain.
Yep.
So what is the, like, chemical composition of those products? Are they biodegradable? A lot of them aren't, right? And so studying what that meant and learning about sustainability and what we now use at Cheekbone Beauty, which is called life cycle thinking analysis. So it's like from the harvesting of a raw ingredient to the end of the life of a product. So, like, is it going to end up in a landfill? And that's a situation we did not want to happen. And who's making it? Where does it come from? Is it being ethically done? There's so many variables to consider when you're sourcing raw ingredients and packaging. And then also figuring out that there's so much misinformation
Mhm.
online, right? We know that. And just even the concept of recycling itself is really a fraud.
Right.
Like, so many of us believe, oh, this is fine because it has that symbol, but we have no idea that
Right.
every region around the world has different recycling rules.
Yep.
And I know a lot about my region. And that means many things that we put in that bin. Even if any food is left on it, it all gets tossed in a landfill. So if we're not perfectly cleaning everything we put in there, and then if it's not a clear plastic, generally things that aren't clear plastic aren't getting recycled. Aluminum, a great resource, and does get recycled, and that's valuable to recycling centers.
Mhm.
So that's one item that fully does get recycled. And then understanding, okay, aluminum, researching that it's actually takes more energy to make aluminum versus plastic versus paper, and paper takes a lot more energy than aluminum. And so really learning that as much as we as human beings love black and white, this
Yes.
eco world and sustainability journey, it is not black and white. It's probably the
Complex.
farthest thing from it. And
Yeah.
so it's just analyzing and figuring out what works for you. How can we just do better individually? And
Yeah.
then for sure, as a business, how can we do better
Yeah.
in terms of what we offer our customers, and then educating them that they get to make a choice in some
Mhm.
cases, and that really being super clear that this is a journey and there's not one end destination, that we're all in the midst right now as a planet really trying to
Mhm.
figure out how to save our planet, right?
Yeah, but you didn't think about that when you woke up from your dream. Like what you're like,
No.
oh, lip gloss, like this will be great. And now all of a sudden it's like, I'm just so I was when I read about or heard about your dream, I feel like that was a calling, to be honest. Like just something that you were called to do. But definitely didn't look like what it is today. And the challenges weren't, it wasn't like someone's like, here's the blueprint for you to take it from your vision to creating a brand that's successful and impactful. It's so much work. And like you said, it is complex. What ingredients are good, what are not good. You know, even scientists are sometimes saying like, well, this chemical is actually non-toxic. And then, 10 years later, like, actually, no, never mind, scratch that. It is toxic. Or,
I know.
so it's constantly evolving. And I appreciate that you share that, because as a business who's trying to grow, and like you said, you start with $500, like, where do you start with that? How do you take it to the next level? It's a grind. And
Hmm.
I love your brand. I love your product, which I am wearing for anyone who can't see me. But I spoke to another lipstick founder. I never wore lipstick until the pandemic, which is ridiculous because I'm wearing a mask all the time. But like, I literally put lipstick on like, I guess it's because I didn't wear lipstick because I didn't trust brands. I didn't find a
Mm.
brand that actually worked, that was natural. And your brand is just, I love the fact I have it here. It's in the paper packaging. So it's just like, check, 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 Jenn. Like I absolutely just love it. And I love your mission of trying to represent so many different types of beauty and calling your products. I think one of them is Aiki is one of them, which is an Indigenous word, correct?
So all the lipsticks that come in that paper packaging are part of our Sustain collection, and they're all Indigenous words for land.
I
So
love
Aki
it.
is actually my community's word for land, but then you have Kia, which is like the Navajo word for land, and we have Anaya now, which is the Hawaiian Native American word for land. So we're like incorporating all of these things, and
Yeah.
so the reason we did that, for us, it's one thing. My grandmother would be beaten for speaking
Oh
Anishinaabe-Moan.
my.
And so this was my way of honoring, bringing back all of our languages and teaching our new friends that are found on this continent with us the words that were here long before we all were, right?
I think that's what I love. Well, I love a lot of things, as I've shared, but I think it is like an educational thing. And I appreciate that you're sharing that, because to be honest, I don't know if everyone knows what a residential school is, or what the system was, or how it impacted the indigenous communities, or what the words are. I didn't know what the word for land was in your language, and I think that's beautiful, And I think when I put your lipstick on, I feel like it kind of connects me to more than just, the
Yeah.
Euro culture. And I just, that's so important to me. And I really, really respect that.
Oh, I appreciate you saying that, because I think that's always been the intention, is like how do we connect as humanity, right? To make
Yeah,
things better. And I feel like when we teach each other things, that's how we start to connect.
absolutely. Amen to that.
And just so your audience is super, nobody expects anyone to know about that history because it was removed from history books.
Mm,
Let's face it, we weren't taught
hmm.
any of this in school. I was, I look in the mirror, I am clearly Native, and every day of my life until I was 38 years old is when I learned about my grandmother's experience in residential school. So if I didn't know, how is everyone else supposed to know? But we're living in a time in history where I think that now the real stories are coming out,
Yeah.
and not that we want to like sit in them. We
Mm,
want to like learn from them and grow and
yeah.
create opportunities for change for people.
We want to heal. And that's what I really think Cheekbone Beauty represents is like, you're naming your products even after role models. Which I was curious because to me, you're such a role model. And I imagine even in your youth, you're a role model, but who's your role model, Jenn? Who has inspired you?
Well, I'm a like I grew up watching Oprah. So believe it or not, she's like a huge well, I'm
Yeah.
a massive Oprah fan. Like I'm totally, and I mean I think there's probably about 1 billion people that are, maybe even more, that are Oprah fans, but I just love her, the way she teaches
Yeah.
and has taught us.
Yeah.
She literally has taught us to heal.
Yep.
And I wish I was paying more attention to the things she was saying when I was a little bit younger, but again, I'm not going to look back. I'm only just going to look forward. But I think she's just been a great teacher of how to heal.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things also that Cheekbone Beauty does, if everything we've talked about is enough, is that you give 10% of your proceeds back to, I believe it's the First Nations Child and Caring Society, which is an amazing society. And I would love for anyone who isn't familiar for you to share why you selected that organization and what work they're doing.
Yeah, so we selected them originally early on, after actually I met with a business advisory board, and they were like, look, they're probably looking at me now looking back like I was crazy or bananas, but they're like, you're going to start a cosmetics company and you want to start a foundation to like give back in honor of your grandmother. They're like, focus on the business and then find an organization that's already doing amazing things that you can support. So, went home, like write it on that pad by my bed. And in the morning, I woke up and there just happened to be something on the news about Cindy Blackstock. And I'm like, who is this woman? And looked her up and found the organization and found the branch or the arm of the organization that we give money back to, which is called Shannon's Dream. And reading Shannon's story was just, again, another thing I learned that year and was eye opening, that there's much less funding goes to kids that go to school on reservation versus off. So right here in Canada, it's 30 to 50% difference. And I know in
Jeez.
the United States, it's the same. The schools on reservations aren't receiving the same funding. And so what that means at the end of the day, it means that those kids are getting less than. They're getting a subpar education, subpar opportunities. I know from my own nieces and nephews that go to school on reservation, in some cases there's like no computers,
Mm.
like there's no library, there's no extracurricular activities. So I feel like, for our children, building this love and fostering this love for education and learning is really key to pulling ourselves out of poverty, out of marginalization. And education, we know, is so, so powerful. So that really spoke to me as the founder. And so we asked them early on, can we do this? And full disclosure, as a brand, we've never made any profits yet.
Mhm.
We're almost there. Haven't made any profits yet, but still have been able to donate to that organization specifically, just over $12,000.
Wow.
And then many more organizations, because we've discovered that there are so many different organizations need support. We've been able to donate in-kind donations, so product, to well over 120,000 over the last year, which has been incredible. So we're giving one group that we supported out of California. It's called Dig Deep, and they have something called the Navajo Water Project. And so
Mm.
we created this give box that we do twice a year. And in the box, we put a whole bunch of products, not only ours, but from other brands that we think are amazing and want to be involved. And then we take a portion of that profit and it goes directly to a donation. And so with the Navajo Water Project, we actually got clean drinking water and solar power to a family on the Navajo reservation.
Wow.
And then with the next give box we did, we planted 2,100 trees, and 1,000 of those went into California, and 1,000 of them went to British Columbia. So we're just like finding, we call it streams of giving at Cheekbone Beauty. Like we
Uh,
just find opportunities and organizations that we can support. At the end of the day, it's really interesting now that I'm in this space. I even feel like this whole I'm going to quote unquote clean beauty
mm-hmm.
and sustainable beauty, because there's
Yeah.
so many
Yep.
it's there's no real definition for this, let's be real.
Yep.
But this space is like, it's more expensive. And then I was like, how is this even fair that if you can't afford
Yep.
a better product,
Yep.
you're going to get subpar products with
Yep.
subpar ingredients?
Yep.
And I was like, this isn't even fair.
Pisses
So
me
that's
off.
why,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I began this mission that, well, we're gonna give our products to communities that I know that can't technically afford them. And so what we do is, for every sustained lipstick that we sell individually, another one will for sure be given. And we've given well over more than what we say we do all the time. So we're just so excited to be able to provide great quality products for people in communities that technically can't afford them. So not only do we, obviously our main mission is what I said, we want to create this movement of empowerment for Indigenous youth, but also for anyone who's feeling like, for me personally, it's like, if you've struggled with addiction,
Mm-hmm.
I just want everyone to know it's possible to heal from that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want anyone that comes from a community maybe that was impoverished, or how you grew up was, less than that. Again, the potential is there for you to rise above and overcome those situations like poverty, because I myself have done that. And then also, we donate to a lot of women's shelters, especially beauty products. If you're coming out of a bad relationship, or you're coming out of homelessness, the last thing you can afford to do is buy a cosmetic product for perhaps a job interview. And
Right.
so we're just looking for any and every way to give back. We do all the time. We always encourage people to reach out to us, because we make things in a more sustainable way. So, which means we try not to overmake things, but no matter how much you try, you'll still have sometimes too much of something. And so, especially early on, we were working with co-packers, and they have MLQs, or limited amount you can have done. And we're like, we're a small brand. And so that's a whole nother story about trying to get people to make smaller runs so you don't waste. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, we thought, okay, fine. If they're not going to do that for us, we're going to use that as an opportunity to give products away.
I love it. Two things that I thought of as you're sharing this. Also, when you're giving, I think for lipstick for women, or women who've been through something, there is something about, I think that's why I'm wearing lipstick during the pandemic. Like you just feel empowered, and your lipsticks are so bright and vibrant. And I feel like that's such a, like, it just kind of gives you that like oomph that I feel like
Mm-hmm.
women could really, or individuals could really benefit from.
I
And then the
agree.
second thing is, if your definition of success, from what I understand, is to give back to your community and the world, which you said in one of your, I feel like I'm just quoting you. I'm like, hey, Jenn, I'm doing an interview with you, but I'm going to quote everything else you've said in the past. But these quotes are just, they just were so meaningful to me, because I think it's so important to be successful, you said, is to give back to your community and to the world. And in that definition, Jenn, you are so successful. And I think so many of us can learn from that, because again, healing, moving forward, connecting with each other, and giving back. Like, it's the golden rule is love your neighbor, give back to your neighbor, love
Yes.
yourself, like put lipstick on if you need to, love yourself, and then
Yeah.
give back and help others, like reach out to people. And it's just crazy to me, like when we talk about social entrepreneurship, like you're the brand that I think, at least for me, I'm obviously like your fangirl right now, but like you're so many of those things that so many people need. And the story behind what you're doing is just, I think everyone needs to go out and buy it, by the way, if you're listening to this, and just be part of this mission and story and journey. So
Thank you so much.
yeah, I want to shift gears because, as I mentioned earlier, you do, I imagine, have like this mindset, like you want to inspire people to dig deep, and you can overcome, and you know, everything is figure outable. And I'm just curious, Jenn, walk us through like when things are challenging for you. I mean, we all have those moments. And you as an entrepreneur running this business, and you're giving back and you're growing and you're thinking about, you know, sustainable life cycle packaging and all of the things, it's going to be challenging. Tears and doubts and fears and all of the above. How do you, Jenn, you know, for anyone listening, take us through your mindset. How do you get out of those darker moments or moments of doubt, or, you know, when you're in that funk?
Yeah. And so reality is there's probably way more tears than there is like
Yeah.
those happy times, and especially
Yeah.
like those social media highlight reel moments. So it's super tough. It's so tough. And um, you know, if it wasn't, that connection I think that I have in this higher power, like I feel like me as just a simple human being could not accomplish anything. So I certainly have a great big belief in the creator and the ability that is that powerful to make, the sun, the moon, the stars, and our planet, and the water system. Like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I'll just sit and I'm walking, like my
Mm-hmm.
daily routine is really um uh really founded in like a ritual where I'm like waking up. I have I'm getting out in nature right away, doing physical fitness, prayer, meditation. And so I think deeply a lot about creation in itself. And what that does is it connects me to the creator, in the sense that these beautiful, like watching the birds in the morning,
Mm.
get their breakfast. They weren't worrying about where their breakfast was going to come from, because it's there for them and ready, and that they're taken care of. And so are we. And then the innate design with so many things in creation, I think, is just so beautiful. And that we have the ability, and that source, that powerful source, is there for us to access. We just have to ask for that help. And so I firmly believe in asking for help. And one piece of advice that I always give any other entrepreneur, and sometimes I do a lot of speaking in front of Indigenous kids,
Mm-hmm.
is that idea of just not giving up.
Mm.
Because it's really, really simple. It's like, if you don't give up on something, like you're eventually going to get somewhere or get something. But it's, if you give up, then you for sure are not going to get anywhere. So it's just that consistent daily effort. It doesn't have to be huge, but just going forward, and not giving up. And then if you fall, you try again, right? Like it's just not giving up. It means you cannot fail, really.
Yeah. For anyone who wants to start a business, especially amongst the Indigenous community, you know, what advice could you share in terms of, yes, not giving up, which is probably the biggest lesson, but what are maybe three other tips where to start? Where can they start if they have kind of like a vision, or that idea, or, you know, they're like, this is crazy and I don't have the means and I'm maybe on the reservation. Like, what do I do? Where do I start?
Start to just search, like, Google, and especially like locally, what in your local community sort of access to business insights or networks or mastermind groups do you have? And I know in Canada we have tons, and I know I've partnered with many Native American women's in groups as well for business and entrepreneurs. And so there's so many out there. So just find one. Right now there's lots online and on social media platforms, but the moment we can gather again, I assure you that getting together with these other people is going to help you streamline your ideas, but then help you actually get it to grow at the same time. So just searching out in your area, and even if you can't find a native group or organization or Indigenous, there is like, I joined the local chamber of commerce,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I did all of those things and went to those meetings, and I can attest that I am get cringy when I have to go meet and hang out with people that I don't know, because it's so hard.
Yeah.
Like I am definitely I like to, my husband's like, you're like a fake introvert because you're secretly, that's how you are. But he's like, you can speak to people in public and be fine, but it is really challenging, especially when I don't know like
Yeah.
someone, or it's a group, you're walking into a group or a meeting where, but I'm like, it's just like, you just take a big deep breath and walk into those rooms and show up, because amazing things can
Mm.
happen. Like I said, this, I was part of a group out of Ottawa, Canada, and I ended up getting, introduced to someone who got me at a speaking event in Toronto. And at that speaking event, this person came up to me and said, I know the founder of Bite Beauty. Do you want to meet them? And he's now still my mentor. It was he and his wife that founded the company. But of course, like that, they're in the industry, they built a beauty brand.
Yeah.
Yes, I would love to talk to them. I have zero
Yeah.
experience. That would be
Yeah.
awesome. And he has been just an incredible mentor since. So unless you show up to those things, and it was like, if you think you go back, it's probably like four things that got me to him, but I did the thing and showed up, right? So just keep doing that as much as you can, as hard as it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the perseverance and the showing up is a big part because I'm really bad at these things. There's someone who said like, uh, who was it that said that? I might need to scratch this, but he's just like the biggest thing you can do is to just show up. Like you're not going to win anything if you don't show up. You know,
I
was
think
it?
it's like a sports person. I
Yeah,
know what you're, yeah, it's
you
like
know,
a sports person who said that.
I
Yeah.
know. I'm like, oh, I don't
Yeah.
remember what it is, but I know it's an important thing because it's
So
true.
Wayne Gretzky said you miss 99% of the shots you don't take, right? So it's that same
Yeah,
idea. Yeah. And that means
exactly.
just showing up at, like, you have to take the shot, right?
Yeah. And I can relate to the whole like cringy when I go to these things. I'm like, "Oh, I have to like look through my purse obsessively because
Oh, I
I'm
have a phone
yeah,
call.
like let me just take another awkward sip of wine."
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
awkward. It's not necessarily
Yes.
and I
Yeah.
think no one is necessarily comfortable even well maybe extroverts like live off of that. And by the way,
Yeah.
you could tell your husband there's a term called ambivert, which is what
Okay. Yes.
I think I am. Audrey Hepburn was an ambivert, and it's basically like you can be an extrovert, but you can't continue that way with that. You need to have that introvertedness. So just a fun
Mm.
fact there. I'm an ambivert.
So I'm not called a fake.
Yeah, you're not a fake extrovert. Yes. So that I love that. And for anyone who wants to support the Native American community, and or what are some of I mean obviously supporting Native American businesses, I cannot stress that enough, but I would love to hear from you like what are things that we can do to support and come together again, heal together.
Yeah, I'm like, I always say, find out where you live. What is the group of Native Americans that live there before you? Because there is groups and tribes,
Yep.
and they were there. And then connect with their community. Find out
Oh,
when
I love
they
that.
are
Yeah.
having a powwow. Show up. Like everybody's welcome to go when there's a powwow, and I can assure you, it'll be one of the most moving experiences you ever have. Because for me, like it's just the music, the drum, the dancing. I don't know. Those are just healing vibes all around.
Yep.
And so like just connect with your community. And if you have questions, find someone that you feel like comfortable with that you can
Mm,
ask,
mm.
because I know Black and Brown communities are struggling right now because
Yep.
the onus is on them to answer all the hard
Yep.
questions, right? So
Yeah.
I know they are struggling. So find somebody at Google. Like Google is amazing, right? And then look at the source, and is it the right answer? And just ask questions. And then I think I was really passionate early on about sharing my story, because when you see the homeless person who clearly struggles from
Hmm.
addiction, know that, you know, maybe I'm just finishing this incredible book, actually by Oprah and a doctor who's a neurologist, called What Happened to You. And it's that whole not idea of, let's stop saying what's wrong with that person
Mm,
versus what happened to them, because we all
mm.
have these small bits of trauma, whether it's generationally, whether it's maybe your own family early childhood experience. but there's bits of trauma in all of us, or a situation that could have happened. There's things that happen to kids now. They know that that causes trauma, that we would think, oh, kids are resilient. That's what everyone used to say, right? But we all have our own stuff that we're
Yeah.
dealing with. So if we're just empathetic to
Yep.
people, like, we're all just doing the best we really can at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Although again, back to my husband sounds like a jerk here, but he said one day, he's like, but what if someone's just a jerk? And I'm like, okay, I'm sure there are people out there that are just jerks. And he's like, I don't have to ask what happened to them.
Yeah.
He goes, I think they're just a jerk.
I feel like sometimes I have to just put them into, you're a jerk, but you still have value, but you're still a jerk. You know what I mean?
Yes,
like you have value as a human, but you're still being a huge jerk. Yeah, for sure. I agree. I think, Jenn, we're coming to your hour. I just want to be mindful of your time and everything. It's been such an amazing conversation. Is there anything that I haven't asked you or that we haven't explored that you want to share with my listeners or your listeners?
No, not at all. I think I just thoroughly enjoy this conversation. So thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I do highly recommend for anyone, I want a second, and I think a lot of people have talked about this throughout the Black Lives Matter movement, like do your research, reach out to people in your community. I think that's just so important. I will be linking up some of the resources that I came across as I've been doing my own research through this, especially when it comes to the residential schools. There's so many testimonials and documents and things that you can use and, become an advocate and research these things. So I will link all of that in the show notes because I think it's really important, whether here in the US or in Canada or anywhere really. Obviously, I won't be including every horrible story throughout time because that would be a super long show notes, but I will link to things that you and I have specifically talked about today.
I think that is so powerful, right? Is when you hear someone's story, it just gives you a little glimpse and you get you just get that much more understanding into that person's world.
Yeah. And how to take action from that. Once you know, it's like, how do you take what you know and then move forward? And I just want to encourage everyone to do that. And I want to encourage everyone to support Cheekbone Beauty. It is the best lipstick and makeup. Obviously, if you've listened all the way to the end, this is an amazing story, journey, mission. And I just want to acknowledge you, Jenn.
I'll share with you. So we're launching in Sephora Canada in September.
Wow.
But I have a meeting with Sephora USA next week.
Oh
so
my.
Just everyone, if you could just start searching Cheekbone Beauty on the Sephora website to push them to introduce our products in their .com as well as their .ca.
That would be amazing. Wow, what a win, Sephora, if you're listening. Like if Sephora carries Cheekbone Beauty, that would be like pretty nice.
Yeah.
Pretty awesome. My final question to you, what does it mean to be a wise consumer to you?
Oh, so I think it just means being conscious, right? Like that idea of just let's think deeper about everything. And that includes all of our purchases.
Absolutely. Jenn, where can we connect with you?
So right now we can be found at cheekbonebeauty.com.
Wonderful. Well, Jenn, thank you so much for your time. I'm really honored and thrilled to be able to have had this conversation. And I just want to encourage you to keep on keeping on. And for anyone listening, make sure to give her a follow on social media and to support her amazing business. So thank you for all the work you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much. This was amazing.
Absolutely. All right, friend, that about wraps it up, but this convo does not have to end here. I would love to hear from you, so please send your questions and comments my way. And if there's a topic you want to hear more about, send me a DM on Instagram at @TheWiseConsumer or email me at hello@thewiseconsumer.com and let's chat. In the meantime, could I ask you to do me a huge favor, please? I'd really appreciate it if you could take a few minutes out of your day to subscribe to my show and leave me a review if you haven't already. You can do so in the iTunes app. It's that purple icon that comes preloaded on most smartphones, but I've also linked it up in the show notes if you're not sure how to access it. Anyway, that wraps it up for today. So until next time, friend, be safe, stay healthy, and take care. Hi, friends. As always, just ending this episode with my obligatory disclaimer. Please remember, the wise consumer is intended for educational purposes only. The content being shared here should not be used as a substitute for professional care by your healthcare provider. I am not a qualified medical expert, nor do I pretend to be, so please note that the content and research I share and explore on this podcast is not intended to treat or diagnose you. If you have any medical questions, concerns, or wish to make changes to your diet, please speak to your physician or any qualified healthcare professional for that matter. The wise consumer may not be held responsible for your health, dietary, or lifestyle decisions. I am simply here to encourage you to seek healthier, more eco-friendly, and conscious alternatives. While the Wise Consumer podcast offers information from many sources, the opinions expressed are solely those of the wise consumer and not those of any affiliate or other entity. Additionally, while I always do my best to source and research the most up-to-date and accurate information, I realize science is continually evolving. If you come across any scientific information that is blatantly incorrect, please kindly email me at hello@thewiseconsumer.com. And finally, this podcast and any other offerings of The Wise Consumer may contain copyrighted material, the use of which has not always been specifically authorized by the copyright owner because it is being used for educational purposes. If you wish to use copyrighted material from this podcast or any other offerings of The Wise Consumer for purposes of your own that go beyond fair use, you must obtain permission from the copyright owner.